picture this scenario. It is late at night. You're standing outside your home or, maybe your car.
Right.
The temperature's dropping, and you have that sudden, just sinking realization in the pit of your stomach. You are locked out.
The worst feeling.
It really is. And you look through the window, and your keys are sitting right there on the kitchen counter, basically mocking you. So you pull out your phone, the battery's probably hovering at around, 5%, and you frantically type "locksmith near me" into the search bar.
Oh, of course you do.
You tap the very first result that pops up. It's an ad promising a ridiculously low $15 service call. And you breathe this massive sigh of relief. You think you're saved. But as we're about to uncover today, you might be walking right into a highly organized trap.
It's a trap that preys entirely on your sense of desperation, because that $15 ad is often the front door to a really sophisticated predatory extortion scheme. Our mission in this deep dive is to arm you with the ultimate consumer protection guide against these locksmith scams. We're tailoring this advice specifically for navigating the market in Los Angeles and the broader state of California, but, these predatory tactics are happening everywhere.
Everywhere.
To break this down, we've pulled together a massive stack of sources for you today. We're looking at official Federal Trade Commission consumer alerts, California state licensing statutes, and some incredible undercover investigative journalism reports.
Including an actual television sting operation, which is wild.
Exactly. A literal sting operation.
Yeah.
We're also pulling from industry training manuals, market research from IBIS World, and raw, real horror stories straight from Reddit users who, unfortunately, lived through this exact nightmare.
It is such a terrifying position to be in, just feeling completely stranded and vulnerable, which is exactly why we partnered with Point Locksmith for this deep dive. They are the exact opposite of the scammers we're warning you about today. When you're in a jam, you need a name you can actually trust. You can call them at 310-295-4040. They are fast, reliable, and professional locksmiths serving all of Los Angeles. From emergency lockouts to rekeying, smart locks, and car key replacements, they're available 200-4/7 to keep your home, business, and vehicle secure. Plus, they have a proven track record of 5-star reviews.
Having a trusted contact saved in your phone is step one, really, because the anatomy of these scams is incredibly sophisticated, and the manipulation begins before you even dial a number.
Right.
The industry calls this the lead generation illusion. Scammers have figured out how to completely manipulate search engines and mapping apps. They flood the internet with hundreds of fake business listings using generic names, things like locksmith services or 247 local locksmith.
And they use local addresses.
Yes. They will list local street addresses in your neighborhood. But if you were to physically drive to those addresses, you'd find an empty dirt lot or a doctor's office or just a completely unrelated business.
They even use retouched photos on those fake map listings to make it look like a real brick-and-mortar storefront. It's crazy. But what I want to understand is how they get to the top of the search results in the first place. The sources mention something called click fraud as their main weapon. How does that actually work to bankrupt the legitimate mom-and-pop shops?
Well, think of it this way. Every time someone clicks on a sponsored search ad, the business running that ad pays a small fee to the search engine. Scammers write automated computer programs, bots, that are designed to click the legitimate local locksmiths ads thousands of times a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it drains the local shop's entire daily advertising budget by noon.
So they literally can't afford to be visible anymore.
Precisely. Once the legitimate businesses can't afford to run their ads anymore, the scammers swoop in and take over the top search spots. So you think you're calling the friendly neighborhood shop down the street, but your call is actually being routed to a massive central call center, which is often located overseas.
And that call center is where the infamous bait and switch begins. The operator on the phone will quote you an unbelievably low price just to get you to agree to the visit. They use highly specific phrasing. You'll hear things like $15 and up, or a flat $50.
Right. That and up is doing a lot of work.
Let me tell you, that and up part of the sentence is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting.
It is. The low price is strictly a psychological hook. Once you agree, they dispatch a contractor. But when that quote-unquote technician arrives, the red flags should immediately start flying. According to the undercover reports, they almost always show up in an unmarked personal vehicle.
Yeah, no professional truck.
Exactly. Maybe they have a flimsy, generic, magnetic sign slapped on the car door, but they aren't wearing a uniform. They don't have clear identification. But the biggest, most glaring red flag of all is what they don't ask for. They do not ask to see your ID.
That is so wild to me. If someone is about to break into a house, you'd think the first order of business is making sure the person standing there actually lives inside.
A legitimate professional will always verify that you own the car or the house before they attempt to bypass the lock. The scammers don't care about your legal right to access the property. They only care about getting their hands on the hardware.
And what they do to that hardware is infuriating. Let's talk about that undercover television sting operation from the sources, because this absolutely blew my mind.
Oh, the Dateline one.
Yes. The investigative journalists set up a test house with a basic standard front door lock. They had a 30-year veteran locksmith test it out first, and he picked the lock open in just 5 seconds. 5 seconds.
Barely an inconvenience for a pro.
Right. Then they called one of these suspected scam companies. The guy shows up, fiddles with the lock for exactly 52 seconds, gives up, claims it's a high-security commercial lock, and immediately pulls out a heavy-duty power drill.
Which highlights their ultimate goal. Scammers want to use destructive entry. They actively want to destroy your lock.
Because it forces a sale.
Exactly. By drilling it out and ruining the mechanism, they create a brand new, urgent problem that only they can solve right then and there. They force you to buy a replacement lock directly from them at an insane markup. They have absolutely no interest in non-destructive entry, even if the lock is incredibly simple to bypass with basic hand tools.
That leads directly into the final extortion phase, and the Reddit threads in our stack of sources are full of just heartbreaking stories about this.
Really are.
There was a 92-year-old woman who was charged $80 just for a lock that was successfully picked after she was explicitly quoted $15 on the phone. Another victim, a man named Dudley, was charged $952 after his house was burglarized.
Just terrible.
His home was broken into, he was terrified and vulnerable, and then the scammer victimized him all over again. And the paperwork they hand over is a total joke.
Really?
They present these generic, blank-looking invoices. One Reddit user noted their receipt had glaring typos all over it, literally spelling the word non-refundable as non-fufundable.
Wow. Yeah, when it comes time to collect that inflated bill, they rely on intimidation. They demand immediate payment via cash, a direct bank transfer app like Zelle, or a mobile swiper like Square. They will even illegally charge you sales tax on the labor portion of the bill, which is a classic tactic to squeeze out a few extra dollars.
Now, before we pivot to how you can defend yourself, it's worth noting a detail from the investigative reports here. Several Better Business Bureau complaints, journalistic stings like Dateline, and consumer tracking reports have traced some of these organized call centers back to overseas networks,
Right.
specifically noting operators linked to Israeli networks. Now, we're just sharing what the investigations uncovered to show you how globally organized and sophisticated these rings are. We aren't making any broad demographic generalizations or taking any political sides here,
Of course not.
but it really highlights that this isn't just one rogue guy in a van. It's a massive, highly coordinated operation.
The sheer scale of it is what makes it so dangerous. But the focus for you as a consumer must remain entirely on the tactics being used on your front porch and how to shield yourself from them. What's great if you live in California is that the state actually has your back here.
They do.
Out of the entire country, only 13 states force locksmiths to be licensed. California is one of them. Under the California Business and Professions Code, specifically Chapter 8.5, obtaining a locksmith license is a serious process.
It's not just a rubber stamp.
No, it's not just filling out a form and paying 20 bucks.
Yeah.
The technicians have to pass rigorous criminal background checks conducted by both the FBI and the Department of Justice.
And remember those fake Google Maps listings we were talking about earlier? California law strictly prohibits the use of fictitious business names that are misleading or constitute false advertising. That is exactly what these scammers are doing when they invent generic names and map them to empty dirt lots. It is highly illegal.
Which is why a legitimate transaction under these California laws looks completely different than the scammer's approach. A real licensed professional will arrive in a clearly marked commercial vehicle. They will readily show you their state-issued identification or pocket card the moment they step out of the truck.
Right.
And most importantly, they will provide a clear, written estimate before any work begins. There is no ambiguous, we'll see when we get it open, pricing model.
You really do not want to be guessing who is showing up at your door in the middle of the night, which is why vetting your locksmith ahead of time is so crucial. That's why we confidently recommend our sponsor, Point Locksmith.
Thank you.
You don't have to guess or worry about background checks. They are verified, highly rated with 5-star reviews, and serve all of LA. Save their number right now, 310-295-4040. They're available 24/7 for your peace of mind.
Getting a verified professional is vital because we really need to talk about why these scammers push so hard to replace your hardware. When that scammer drills your lock in 52 seconds, they don't replace it with something of equal or greater value to what you originally had.
Not even close. The sources highlight that they will replace your destroyed lock with the absolute cheapest possible hardware they can find in their van. One experienced locksmith on a Reddit forum pointed out that scammers love to use a specific model called an LSDA SC1 deadbolt. Wholesale, that piece of metal costs about $12, but the scammer will charge you $200 for it, looking you dead in the eye and claiming it's a high-security upgrade.
Understanding the mechanics of a lock becomes really important here to understand why that's so bad. Those cheap, basic hardware store locks operate on what is called a standard pin tumbler system.
I've always wondered how those actually work inside. The sources mention shear lines and cylinders, but it gets pretty dense. How would you explain a pin tumbler to someone who has never taken a lock apart?
Sure. Think of the inside of your lock like a jagged comb. There are straight metal pins of different sizes, sitting vertically on tiny springs. When you slide the correct key in, the specific grooves and ridges of your key push all those pins up to the exact same height.
Okay, I can picture that.
This creates a perfectly clear horizontal path across the cylinder, which is called a shear line. Once that path is clear, the lock is allowed to rotate and the door opens.
So if the pins are just sitting there on springs, that means those basic $12 locks are incredibly vulnerable. Someone with basic lock-picking tools can just manually push the pins up one by one.
Exactly.
The sources also mentioned a technique called bumping that works against these cheap locks. What exactly is that?
Bumping is alarmingly simple. Someone takes a specially cut key, inserts it into the cheap lock, and strikes the back of the key with a mallet or a screwdriver handle. The kinetic energy forces all those straight pins to jump up simultaneously for a fraction of a second. If they turn the key at that exact millisecond, the lock opens.
That is terrifying, just hitting it with a screwdriver.
Pretty much.
So how do legitimate high-security locks actually stop someone from doing that? The sources mention things like spool pins, sidewards, and magnetic pins, but gloss over how they actually function to protect your home.
A high-security lock throws several physical roadblocks at an attacker. Instead of those straight metal pins we talked about, they use modified driver pins. These are shaped like schools, mushrooms, or barrels.
Like actual tiny mushrooms.
Sort of, yeah. They have thinner middles. When someone tries to pick or bump the lock, these strangely shaped pins get caught on the internal lip of the lock's housing. It creates a false set, tricking the person picking the lock into thinking the pin is correctly aligned when it's actually jammed.
What about sidewards? I saw that term and couldn't quite picture it.
Sideward is basically a physical obstruction built directly into the keyhole itself. Unless your physical key has a specific proprietary groove carved into the side of the blade, it won't even slide into the lock cylinder.
Oh, that makes sense.
Add in magnetic pins, which require a key to have a corresponding magnet to lift a pin without even touching it physically, and you have a system that is nearly impossible to bypass quickly.
Let's talk about the real cost of all this. Because paying $200 for a $12 piece of junk from a scammer is a massive ripoff. But the long-term cost of having a vulnerable door seems so much worse.
The initial extortion is just the beginning. The long-term cost of cheap hardware includes break-ins, property damage, replacing stolen goods, and the subsequent spikes in your homeowner's insurance premiums. We looked at market research from IBISWorld and trend reports from This Old House, and they show a massive shift in the security industry toward advanced installations. People are moving toward restricted key systems.
I love the idea of restricted keys. It means someone can't just take your house key to a hardware store and make an unauthorized copy while they're watching your dog for the weekend. The locksmith physically isn't allowed to cut the key without your explicit authorization.
That physical control is huge, but the data also shows a boom in smart tech. Biometric locks that use your fingerprint, Wi-Fi-enabled deadbolts, RFID fob systems.
Right, the whole smart home integration.
Exactly. The initial investment might be $200 to $400 for the hardware, but the return on investment in preventing burglaries and giving you absolute, auditable control over who enters your home is massive. You are fundamentally changing your security posture. You are moving from a passive, easily bypassed piece of cheap metal that a scammer drilled onto your door to an active, integrated security system.
But to get those high-end systems installed, you have to successfully navigate the hiring process without getting scammed in the first place. So let's build your action plan. What do you do if you find yourself in the middle of one of these shady situations?
Right, this is crucial.
First, if they quote you $15 on the phone and then demand hundreds of dollars the moment they look at your door, do not agree to the bait and switch. You have every right to turn them away before they even touch your property.
Sometimes it isn't that easy, though. If they've already done the work, or if they're acting aggressive and you feel intimidated and cornered, which happens frequently in these late-night high-stress situations,
Right.
and they demand an exorbitant amount of money, pay with a credit card.
Yes.
Never pay with cash, and absolutely never use a direct transfer app like Zelle or Venmo.
This is a huge piece of advice. A Reddit user in our sources shared a story where they were extorted for $600 by a scammer who swiped their card on a Square reader. But because they used a major credit card, they were able to immediately call their bank the next morning, explain the fraudulent bait-and-switch tactics, and successfully initiate a chargeback.
That's the power of the credit card.
They got their entire $600 refunded because credit cards offer robust fraud protection. If you hand over cash or use Zelle, that money is gone forever.
Using a credit card is a fantastic mitigation strategy after the fact, but the Federal Trade Commission has a golden rule that prevents this scenario entirely. Find a reputable locksmith before you actually need one.
So simple, but so effective.
Treat this service just like finding a good pediatrician or a reliable auto mechanic. Do the research when you are sitting comfortably on your couch in the middle of the afternoon, not when you were shivering on your porch at 2 in the morning. Program a verified number into your phone today.
To make that research phase as easy as possible, we have distilled everything into a rapid-fire Los Angeles hiring checklist for you. Ready?
Go for it.
Number 1, check local reviews and look for a consistent physical business address on their website. Verify it on Street View. Don't just trust a generic map pin. Number 2, ensure they are properly licensed by the California Bureau of Security and Investigative Services.
Very important.
Number 3, demand a firm final price estimate over the phone before they dispatch anyone to your location. Number 4, when they arrive, confirm they are in a clearly marked professional vehicle and ask to see their state-issued ID before you even point to the door.
And number 5, the ultimate litmus test for a true professional. Ensure they ask to see your ID to verify that you actually own the property or the vehicle they are about to open. If they don't care who you are, they are almost certainly a scammer.
You can cross that first step off your checklist right now. If you are in the LA area, put our sponsor, Point Locksmith, in your contacts right now. Call 31295-4Z40. Backed by 5-star reviews, they handle emergency lockouts, high security upgrades, and commercial needs 24/7. Don't wait for emergency to find a pro.
It really all comes down to taking control of your security before you find yourself in a vulnerable position.
So, to recap our journey today, we've decoded the predatory lead generation tactics and click fraud that scammers use to hijack search results. We've explored the legal shields provided by California state law, specifically the background checks required for licensing.
Yep.
And we've unpacked the mechanics of pin tumblers and spiggle pins to show why investing in high-quality, high-security hardware is actually the cheapest option in the long run.
It is a lot of information to digest, but before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We spent this whole time talking about the physical locks in our doors, the brass, the steel, the pins, and the strangers we physically trust to come open them.
Right.
But as our homes become increasingly connected to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth networks through these incredible new smart locks we just discussed, it raises a fascinating question. If a physical lock can be drilled and bypassed by a scammer in 52 seconds, how secure are the invisible digital keys we are handing over to massive tech companies every single day? Is the next frontier of home invasion going to happen without a single scratched door frame or picked lock?
That is a terrifying and brilliant question to leave off on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay safe out there, stay curious, and lock up tight.